So what I would like to do now, I can give you some time for questions that may have come up during the presentation. I have lots of them myself. So anyone?
Ставить вопросы. Что касается
Those
последнего,
who want can start asking your questions now. As to the last presentation, yes, indeed, Bratislava is like a capital of the world in terms of peace, and I will be immodest enough to say that this was my idea at the end of the previous symposium. Because when I was a student, I remembered all the time, so golden Praga, and what's Bratislava? Bratislava is a place of peace. More than that, I invited ex-president, Prime Minister of Czechia, Václav Havel. Fortunately, the mic has gone dead. Was right here inside this hotel. And his answer was quite funny for me and for Mr. Prime Minister, quite to be expected. Before the meeting, he said, keep safe with Klaus. But we've known Klaus for a long time. We met each other in Prague. So he said, I am not going to speak because I am against the title of your symposium. That's Václav Klaus. Thank Lord that in spite of all the Czech people are like this, we have himself and Jan Campbell, the great presentation. I don't know how he's going to come back to Prague after this presentation. But Václav Klaus, well, before this February, when I was inviting him, he said that this would not be very safe for him. And then we met after the symposium, and he said, "Oh, for the Czech people, it's really very dangerous." Same thing applies to the member of our Prague person, Cyril Sloboda, who was prime minister 4 times. He said, Ashot, I can't afford doing this, speaking at your event. So in this context, Mr. Buzek has done a great job. Now, about what he said, well, I think everyone here has a doubt that Russia could collude with America. I mean, Putin and Biden or something like that. But on the other hand, that Russia stands to gain from this is a fact of life, because they managed to get some things solved overnight that would have hardly been possible in any other way. Like, for instance, getting rid of the fifth column. People like Garry Kasparov, whose mother is Armenian, whose father is a Jewish. He was born in Baku and then made his career in Moscow. And now he surprisingly keeps the attention of Armenians, which surprises me. So he's very much against Azerbaijan and so on, and hates Russia, tries to destroy it, and I can't understand this. There was a symposium here several years ago, and he took part, and he wasn't alone. And so in this respect, I have certain doubts, Mr. Buzek, that such a collusion was possible, but that the fifth column has been ousted from Russia. That is true. Second, import substitution, that was absolutely incredible. If I may, it's a fact that the fifth column has left Russia. But please note that we are being constantly being swarmed with the dangerous news or rumors that Putin is going to be ousted. But who's going to oust him if everybody has left the country? Whereas it's always in the news. Yes, you're right. And you know, the effect of this is very low. In front, before the whole world's eyes, Putin has become strong. And what he's done in the very recent time, that's also a surprise. His trip to North Korea, it's an incredible step. And the leader, like Russia has, is a dream of any country. I mean, you wouldn't need more than fingers on one hand to list such countries: China, India, and another couple of countries. North Korea, by the way, and Azerbaijan also has a leader like this, because in our case, I mean, Armenia, such a scum that the West has put in his position. See, the country started losing everything. It lost the territory. So if the Armenian people is not going to summon up strength to oust him, but they have the strength. They've had rallies and demonstrations over the past month, but it was so slickly and professionally done. So somehow they are never successful in throwing him away. So today's situation in Armenia is being touted as democratic, whereas the neighbor country, Azerbaijan, is considered to be a sultanate. And so, but on the other hand, I hate Aliyev. And to be absolutely frank, he was so wise working for the past 15 years. In the beginning, he was a complete zero when he replaced his father. But he managed to use his, how to call it? Well, he did his studies in Moscow Foreign Affairs University, had good knowledge as a diplomat. And his father, of course, it was an absolutely different caliber of a man. But he did very wise things. I'm not going to advertise him, but he's grown into a serious leader. And in the West, they call him a dictator, a sultan. I also want a sultan like this in Armenia, very much. I'm a very freedom-loving person. I never spent time in prison as my colleague is, but I was like a terrible dissident during the Soviet times, a liberal. And now I'm looking for dictators for Armenia. If anybody has some to offer, please oblige me. We want very much. If I may, I would like to say the fact that I said that this is a contract war, I don't mean that Putin and Biden in person sat down and made an agreement. No, firstly, such agreements may happen in a natural way or in a forced way. If you're signing an agreement for electric power, for gas, nobody is asking any your opinion about the conditions. You just have to have a choice of whether signing or not signing. Another phenomenon, going away from this war a bit, I represent a small country. And over these past 30 years, what I've seen, how the whole countries were erased. It starts with an increased pressure, and then you observe all these phenomena. Mr. Mozak, I agree. Well, you need to connect. It's just your definition was quite intriguing, and that's why I focused my attention on this. I remember last time we had a genius of a presentation from Konstantin Zatulin. And by the way, tomorrow he's going to speak again. And he repeated for the first time internationally the information that I think he had got from me. I didn't ask him while I was visiting him at the end of May. And he said that Nikol Pashinyan, the clown we have for a president, sold? No, what's the word? Well, he betrayed, yes, betrayed, that's the word. He betrayed and sold Nagorny Karabakh. Betrayed and sold. So this sold is, well, I told him about that in January when we met. I said that Aliyev was offering 5 billion for Karabakh. And I was the first one who told that to Zatulin. You know Asimilazadeh? Mr. Asimilazadeh, I spent 5 years in Krinitz European Economic Forum, quite a large-scale forum. I once invited him there. He spoke at my forum. And I was suggesting everything. I was the chairman of the Southern Caucasus panel. And so I invited people from Azerbaijan, Georgia, Armenia, and from the EU. I mean, I presented the largest, the most important people I could lay my hands on. And 3 times as a minimum, we had a similar Zadeh. I think he has quite high standing in Azerbaijan. And last year, a similar Zadeh said, Mr. Gregorian, on behalf of Imam Aliyev, I offer you 5 billion. And then he mentioned some unthinkable amount. To me, personally, 5 billion. If I work in this direction so that Karabakh should be transferred to Azerbaijan. And he said, we're going to invest 60 billion. So, you know, the numbers are so large that I had a problem believing. But on the other hand, Ms. Mihalis, one of the deputies in the Armenian parliament, a young guy, he said, you see, Azerbaijanian, so you think that your motherland can be bought and sold. And Armenians don't think like that. If they hear something like that, they will say, goodbye, go away. But I left this information to myself because, frankly speaking, I myself couldn't believe that it was serious. And then last year, they started a phone recording of Lukashenko talking to Sarkisyan. And well, Lukashenko said, Aliyev offered 5 billion for Karabakh. I am passing this information to you. And Sarkisyan responded, pass on to Ilham that I will give 6 billion. And we thought that this would be the end of it. And that was 2020. The 2016, I think. And then in 2018, in May, they had this colored revolution. And the first meeting between Nikol Pashinyan and Ilham Aliyev, I don't quite remember where it was held, in Astana, somewhere else. It was a secret meeting. They were speaking at some conference and then met one-on-one. And journalists asked Nikola, no, he said, nothing like that happened. And then a video came up showing him getting out of the lift box together with Aliyev, and they called it lift diplomacy or elevator diplomacy in Armenia. And then it became obvious to all of us that this scum of a man agreed on getting these 5 billion. And so it's like a favorite person for Europe, for America. By the way, they don't know now what to do it, but that's a terrible fact that motherland can be bought and sold. So Armenians were laughing at that. It was just incredible. But then, I mean, the human history goes back more than 3,000 years, and we know that similar things have happened quite a few times in the history of Armenia and other countries, and the great people of Russia have also had its share of traitors in its history. So now I'm saying this because this recording will become available worldwide for everybody to know what a dictator is today and who a democrat is, and how these democrats are chosen through, well, using all sorts of colored revolutions. So take Saakashvili, for instance. What did Saakashvili do for his people? Sorry, mic turned off. So they started on this catastrophic way quite late. And had anybody told me in 2018 that it's quite possible that Pashinyan would spend even 2 years in this position, I wouldn't have believed it. But he's been in this position for 6 years already, and we can't do anything about that. Take Slovakia. It has like a unique government today. And what was a year ago at this time? It was such a large-scale sell-off of the government. President K. Kaputala. Before that, we had Prime Minister Igor Matovich. I liked telling Slovakian that Kaputala and Matovich, the two of them are better than one Pashinyan. Everybody was laughing. But then Robert Fico won. He had a very good team, and then he was shot at. So this is the time we're living in. We've been listening with a lot of interest to what President of Moldova had to say. And you see the problems they are facing. Again, the government that's touted to be democratic, any regular Moldovan would say, I don't want this kind of democracy. No, thank you. The Czech have a genius of a president. A genius of a president. General Pavel Petr or Petr Pavel Cheva. Also, this prime minister was terrible. There, when they get to the level of Slovakia, it's incredible. It's just incredible. Yeah, just a minute. And if we are calling the Czech Republic a democracy, this is a very big it's very far away from the truth. So can you imagine, Václav Klaus is scared of speaking up at our conference. We were with him together in the government of Czechoslovakia. Yes, you warned me. Mr. Rush, may I ask a question to the representatives of Central and Eastern Europe who are sitting around this table? Because we in Germany seem to be quite outside. So it's not Central. So you're Central Europe now. Well, Germany is Western Europe. I'm joking. West Germany is America, and I'm joking. Actually, a serious question. Why in East European countries, let's still keep this term, Osteuropa, why is Russophobia so high in these countries. I'm just not talking about the time after 2022, but in my memory, Italians, the French, and other people in West Europe always wanted to develop relations with Russia. And they were telling Russia, so let East European countries to join NATO because they will start loving you because you've let them go. But what happened is an absolutely opposite to this. And this is typical of elites. By the way, not common people. Common people don't have Russophobia, so it's typical of the elites. But this is the people in this elite come from the Soviet past. Is this something about psychological complexes? The Baltic people and the Poles, same thing. I'm not even talking about the past 2 years. I'm talking about the past 20 years because it was them who were dragging us into the common conflict with the West, putting brakes on partnership, demanding NATO enlargement. Germany and France were against it. Just why? I just don't understand the mentality of elite members. That's my question. Maybe I'm naive.
Попробую ответить.
I will try to answer.
Я вижу две,
I see
скажем, главные,
two main,
скажем, теоретически,
well,
нет,
theoretically
теоретически,
speaking and practically speaking, two general reasons:
и элиты.
common histories and
История
elite.
это у Польши. Польша,
Well, history is more typical for Poland.
практически, почти всегда была,
Poland had always been Russophobic,
значит, история Польши.
or almost always. That's the history of Poland. So be it.
И в других нет.
But not in other countries.
Словакия даже
But
вступила в
take
НАТО,
Slovakia.
является
Slovakia joined NATO, but it's not a Russophobic
Чехия это немножко как-то
country.
по-другому.
The Czech Republic is a little bit more complicated.
Ну, года два-три тому назад,
A couple of years ago,
одной коллеги
I was
из Чехии
talk,
спрашивали,
talking to a colleague
почему
from the
Чехия,
Czech Republic, and I asked her,
скажем,
why is the Czech Republic so Russophobic? And she said,
ну, знаешь,
well,
мы были
you know,
первым
we were
kurfürstом
the first
Венгерской империи.
kurfürst of the German Empire. The Czech king was.
Пожалуйста.
Okay.
Что касается Прибалтики,
As for the Baltic countries,
там,
I
наверное,
don't really know.
уже не был такой русофобский.
People had not been such
Еще
Russophobic
хочу
before.
сказать,
I don't
есть
think so.
одна важная,
And there is one more important consideration to keep in mind here to complement those reasons.
эти народы,
All these nations, all these peoples,
для нас был, ну, в последних годах, 80-х
especially in the late 1980s, viewed Europe and the West as something very nice, something very good, free, good living standards, and so on. And as a result of that, or maybe not as a result of that, the people and the elite, even the new emerging elites, I belonged to this emerging elite at the time, they were not used to using the technology that had been in use in political technology that had been in use in the West for decades. And so when it started to be used in our countries, societies in our countries were easily to process, to brainwash, if you will. They were an easy prey, were easy to manipulate. And even now we can see that even in Ukraine, the European Union is still the ideal, the perfect world.
Что касается история, я
So that's history. The Poland, the Baltics, I just don't know how far that goes. The Slovak Republic, the Czech Republic, maybe slightly touched by that. Hungary, it turns out, is not at all Russophobic. Or the history of Hungary is really focused on the interest of Hungary. So Viktor Orban finds it easier than the other leaders in other countries to tell its people that our interests are now telling us that we should not be acting as directly against Russia as other Eastern European countries. Instead, we need to stand for our own interests. As for Bulgaria, in Bulgaria, we see the fight against the elite, between the elites and the people, as far as I know. As far as I know, Bulgaria. Because Bulgaria has been friends with Russia since the 19th century. Russia basically liberated Bulgaria from under the Ottoman yoke. And so I don't think you need a lot of pushing to ensure that things turn towards friendship with Russia. Based on international polls about foreign policy, Bulgaria and Slovakia are competing in terms of who's going to be better. In some cases, Bulgaria is better than Slovakia. Slovakia is better in other respects. So they're competing. Romania, for one, had a long history of fighting with Russia over land in the east of the country. But these are peoples. As for the elites started out as three elites. Václav Havel said in 1990 in the US Congress in March or in April in 1990 that he had hoped that the US soldiers that were in Europe, that they would go back to their mothers across the ocean. He said this in the US Congress, which means that at the time they had not thought about the enlargement of NATO, that it will continue. But buying that elite, and I'm not just talking about buying with money, with a combination of money, influence, opportunities that were accorded to these elites, has led these elites to becoming very pro-US. And they were saying what the Americans had wanted them to. At least initially, the Americans, was it George Bush or others, promised to Gorbachev, yes, indeed, NATO is not going to expand to the east, not an inch. But then it did start expanding and enlarging, and then the US president started approaching directly the elites in Eastern Europe. And Havel was saying that you need to enlarge NATO. Landsbergis in Lithuania said similar things, and others as well. So it was not that easy, or rather that difficult for the Americans to buy, not just with money, as I said, but with all other means, these several people from the elite to start following the US tune and asking them to stay there in Europe and to move eastwards. And that was followed by the following: 70% of the political technologies and political tricks and trickery that were used, that led these countries to the Russophobic camp. And that's what we are experiencing here. That's what we're going through right now. Yes, Viktor Orban in Hungary has been able to pull Hungary out of the Russophobic camp. Robert Fico has also managed to do that, and we'll see who will be next. And I can only add that Jan Busek may be able to say his opinion about this. That in the case of the Czech Republic, the Czech and the Slovak republics are still very close to each other, even after the breakup of the Czechoslovakia. And for the Slovaks, the Czech Republic is an example in some respects, and it's the other way around. For the Czech Republic, some issues are an example for the Czech Republic. And so now, microphone is not working. Microphone. Okay, the Czech Republic, for them, Slovakia is the territory that they could use to supply the Czech Republic with products. And the other way around is also true. I've been in contact with these people in the Czech Republic, and they're saying that Slovakia is very good. That's my answer. Thank you. Mr. Rar, I'm sorry, I have an answer that says that the politics is the extension of the economics. And if I look at the Czech economy, I can see that most of the investment, over 50% of them are German investments. Cellular communications, more than 30% of that is owned by the Germans. The mass media are German dominated. And I can say that we only have to sell our post to Deutsche Post and the railroad to Deutsche Bahn, and the last Czech can turn off their light. So I don't know who to ask why we're so Russophobic. But probably somebody wants us to be Russophobic, same as the Baltic Emirates. Mr. Buzek, I would like to join what you've said. And I would like to join what my partner has said. When he started talking, I was thinking, I will take up the microphone, I will say what he said later on. The Western political trickery and technology. What is the freedom of speech? When I was a student, I was ready to give up my life for the freedom of speech. Then there was democracy and others. And now I said, I'm looking for a dictator because democracy is such an illusion. It's such a delusion. It's so low and is something that is being sold left and right. And my dear friends, when I'm in Armenia, I always say, my party is my people. My people is my party. I am against parties because it's a system that was devised by the deep state and used by deep state. And in every country, the party says one thing before the elections and it does a different thing after the election. That's everywhere. They couldn't care less about the country. And every party thinks just about itself, not about the people and not about the country. And if it happens that I become the head of the government in Armenia, and that's a possibility, a strong one, the first thing I would do, I would say goodbye to all of the parties. The government will not be party-based because my party is my people. That's the idea that I want to use in Armenia as an experiment. And as for the economic revolution, we'll try to implement that. And Mr. Hazin will be talking to us tomorrow. I really like his ideas. And if these two fantastic revolutions are to take place, no party, give us Armenia for 3 years with no parties, and you'll see the results, the outcome, what kind of a country it will be. So that's my theory. And those technologies that the West has, they had been destroying, Alexander, all of the European countries in the east of Europe through those technologies. The GDR, the Eastern Germany, I was there in 85 and 86. I hated that socialism of Eastern Germany and their commitment to those ideas. And the West Berlin was on the other side of the wall. And we thought that West Berlin was a paradise, a piece of paradise. But when the wall fell down and I visited the West Berlin, I saw that the paradise actually stayed back where I was. The Eastern Berlin was so beautiful at the time. You couldn't imagine it. Erwiner Dom and others. That's all in the eastern part of Berlin. So unfortunately, it's a lot of propaganda. It destroys humanity. I don't know if I've answered. I was told by a friend of mine, a German, Angel Schnack, that 2 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, many tourists visited from China. The Germans started joking that the Chinese are smiling. Why are they smiling? Why are they laughing? Why are they so happy? Noisy and so on. And the Germans say, because their wall is still up there. That was 2 years after the fall of the wall. That's amazing. But if you could give me a couple of minutes to make a couple of comments. First, you talked about the 30-year war and the Peace of Westphalia. I think the situation today reminds us more of the War of the Spanish Succession, 1807-1814, which discredited the Peace of Westphalia because peace was not established. But after the War of Succession, the peace lasted quite long. I believe that the Peace of Westphalia was created in the Yalta in 1944. But Yalta is gone. We understand this. Mr. Grigoryan really laughed when I once told him a joke from Odessa. Many Russian speakers know this joke. It's very short, and I'll allow myself to joke. It's the evening after all. We're all tired. A woman at a train station in Odessa lights the train and is looking for a cab. A man walks up to her and is saying to her, "I can take you anywhere." So he takes her to a car and she says, "But you are not a taxi driver. You are a private driver." And he says, "Madam, do you need the ride or do you need a cab sign on the car? Make your choice." So if we tell ourselves today that we need a sign, a symbol, talk about democracy, whether Russophobic trends are good or not, we're not ever going to get to the point where we will be riding this cab. So what makes this discussion different is that finally in the Central Europe and in Slovakia, we're going back to the topic of the conference after all, for the first time, compared to the previous periods, we have a chance to ensure that there is agency and subjectiveness, so that we no longer, or they no longer act as a battlefield for such forces as Russia included. Russia is a very powerful country, as I said today. We have a lot of deficiencies, we have a lot of weaknesses and flaws. Alexander Raj asked this question about Russophobia. It's very unpleasant. We had been surprised. Why? Why? That's terrible. You've banned a Dostoevsky conference. You don't want to listen to Tchaikovsky. Are you idiots? And yet, we kept saying, no, we will not stop reading Goethe or Shakespeare or listen to Mahler. This is crazy. But Russophobia actually had a positive side for us to consolidate our society.
Russophobia consolidates общество в
This
России.
Russophobia consolidates the society in Russia. The society in Russia is changing its worldview, the way it sees the world. I travel a lot across Russia in regions, and they start to understand that the old order has come to an end. And I agree with Mr. Buzov that in America, they understood it in the beginning of the 2000s, in 2003, and I read these papers. This is not exactly what in Russia they call dirty contracts. So basically, it means that in the US they understood it, and Putin and his entourage have also understood this. It doesn't mean that they had, you know, they signed a contract or something like that. It's just they both understood it. So Russia just showed that you won't have enough duct tape to isolate it with its geostrategic position. Yes, maybe the US just a strategic position is a bit better, but Russia is not bad either. It has pathways to Central Asia, and even if you cut marine communications, it will be able to break through the continent. So I believe that today's the day when Central Europe and Slovakia in the first place, which sounds a bit strange because they always used to put Czechia in front of Slovakia because Czechoslovakia, even psychologically, the name was this. But what I'm trying to say is that for the first time, quite a surprising chance emerges for Slovakia to become, if not the center of power, but at least not to become a test bed to, you know, do warfare. Because London has resources like the British Commonwealth and control over Gibraltar. It is the Bank of International Settlement, so on and so forth. I have a friend of mine, Kamil Eskerhanov, sitting next to me, who lives in Baku, and it would seem that we shouldn't be able to find common ground for a conversation at all. What did we understand talking to each other as human individuals? That the old world is gone, and in the new world, the inertia will stop working very soon, and you'll need to find new formats, unexpected formats to find a place in this new world. Like, for instance, Azerbaijan had this dream of taking Karabakh. Okay, you got Karabakh now. Even today, Pashinyan is going to meet the demands of Ilham Aliyev so that certain pre-border areas are passed over. But what is he doing that? He is not actually fixing this. He is not gets that through the Ministry of Justice. He doesn't pass it in a legitimate way to the parliament. You understand that the way he's doing this is illegal. What for? Very parallel to the situation in Moldova. Like it's no chance that the latest visits from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia were to Chisinau. You know, there's a very interesting game going on for the influence on Moldova and Armenia with an attempt to use these countries as new centers to be used in the future wars. But if in the past Azerbaijan was somehow negotiating and, as they say, offering money for that, now in this new situation, the initiators of war, the planned initiators of war, are Armenia and Moldova. Can we allow that? Why don't we get rid of illusions after all? Get rid of these inertia-based paradigms that are no longer going to work. And frankly, I think that it's exactly that these new formats can be developed based on the concept of Bratislava as the peace capital, because these are very interesting formats that could result in shaping certain kinds of confederation, because the EU bringing together the sovereignty of a large of all countries resulted in major powers such as Germany and France losing the sovereignty. Where's that sovereignty? They became a tool for other centers of power, right? And this tool can break, and so damn it, who cares? Remember what Victoria Nuland said, and that spread virally across the internet. You remember what she said about Russia, about Europe. She used four-letter words talking about Europe and Russia. Thankfully, maybe because of this, thanks to this, Russophobia is becoming more pragmatic. And those who spoke from a Russophobic position now can find themselves in a situation where Russia says, okay, so we know you as a Russophobe, so no more benefits from us, please. So why Russia needs Czechia? No reason at all. It doesn't need it. We have enough territory. And we don't need to occupy Czechia, with all those complaining Czech people. We want to be able to come there for a visit, to have a beer or two and go away. And I mean, I think you understand what I'm talking about. Any image of Russia as a living hell on earth, it is just laughable. Again, I travel quite a lot across Russia. They are at a different level of wealth. There was only one region where it was very, very sad. It was the Kirov region, where one of the liberals was head for some time, Nikita Belov. So frankly, what I see doesn't match the picture they're drawing up for us. And we are not concerned about that. We don't see any need in advertising this, because at the end of the day, we have our own concerns, and we don't really need being liked by anyone. If in the past some Russians had this frustration regarding that, so we have a bad image. Now, well, less and less people care about that. And actually, this is the result of this Russophobia. The period of cultural frustration is coming to an end in Russia. It is Russophobia that has become medication for this hyper reflection. So we're laughing at how what people are saying about us. But in practical terms, you can, negotiate and agree anything. And it's Slovakia that has become, that can become the point of crystallization. And by the way, so that Europe and South Caucasus should not again become a battleground for a fight between centers of power. Thank you. Thank you. Look, it's 10 minutes to the hour, and we have a restaurant booked next to this room. So I invite everyone to join us there. We also prepared everything so that the soccer match could be watched, because a lot of people called me and said, look, today it's the soccer match, and tomorrow the whole of Slovakia will be looking at a very important match between Slovakia and Ukraine. So I organized it like this, so that you could, feel free to go at 3 p.m. And today, if there are no more questions, I suggest maybe, just like Alexander Ra, go back to his room, go down, and at 6 p.m., I invite all of you in the restaurant, to the restaurant for the dinner. Thank you.